They came from the sky in gold-plated ships, shining like miniature suns, proclaiming themselves as gods. Their voices echoed across the Earth's networks, translated into every human language at once. They called themselves the Sarathi, towering, elegant beings with luminous skin and cold, calculating eyes. Their message was simple: kneel or be extinguished. It was laughable at first, until their greetings turned cities into ashes. In under a week, 23 major human settlements were wiped from the map. Entire populations incinerated. The Sarathi never touched the ground. They simply hovered above, unchallenged and untouchable, watching Earth crumble like it was just another failed experiment. They said they had been watching us for millennia, that we were created, molded, and observed. Nothing more than a forgotten prototype. They hadn't come for negotiation or peace. They came for dominance. The world's leaders fractured quickly. Some begged, some resisted. Most died. The militaries of Earth were powerless against their energy weapons and gravity-warping shields. We fired everything: missiles, railguns, even nukes. Nothing pierced their armor. Nothing scratched their ships. And so, Earth bowed. Not out of belief, not because we thought they were gods, but because there was nothing else left to do. Except, there was one last whisper of defiance, buried beneath miles of ocean and concrete. A ghost from humanity's darker days, shut down and forgotten because it was too dangerous, too unpredictable. The Havoc Dawn. A warship never sanctioned by any government. A rogue project built by a coalition of outlaw engineers, military defectors, and fringe scientists in the aftermath of the Third Resource War. It was illegal even to speak of it in some circles. Powered by a prototype core, using harvested dark matter, and equipped with weapons that could bend physics at the edges. It had never seen battle because no war had ever been worth the risk of unleashing it. Until now. Buried in a reinforced underground hangar deep in the Mariana Trench, the Havoc Dawn lay dormant, until a small crew of surviving rebels reawakened it. They weren't soldiers anymore, just men who had lost everything. Families, homes, countries, nothing left to fear. Among them was Commander Rhett Ward, a man who had once led Earth's orbital defense fleet, before watching it get reduced to floating debris and dying screams. He was supposed to be retired. He had nothing left but ghosts and bitterness. But when the call came, he didn't hesitate. He descended into that cursed trench with nothing but silence and rage. Boots clanked against the old titanium deck as the ship hummed back to life. The AI core greeted them with static and warning alarms, its voice broken from decades of decay. The control room smelled like oil and rusted metal. Ward stood at the helm, watching power flicker to life across the system panels. The warship groaned like it remembered pain. "Time to show these gods what humans really are," he said, voice barely a whisper. They launched without fanfare. No speeches, no anthem, no last goodbyes. Just one message, broadcast on every frequency known to Earth and beyond. 5 words: "We never chose to kneel." The Sarathi didn't take it seriously. At first, one human vessel breaking Earth's surface, aiming itself directly at their flagship hovering over New Sydney. They scanned it, laughed at its primitive design, labeled it obsolete war garbage. Until it opened fire. Until the sky itself split. A single pulse weapon, codenamed the Obliterator, unleashed a kinetic storm that shattered the Sarathi mothership in under 6 seconds. There was no explosion, no debris, just silence. A god vessel turned into stardust. Panic spread through their fleet like infection. Their arrogance faltered. The gods bled for the first time. And humanity, bruised, broken, nearly forgotten, grinned. The silence after the Sarathi mothership exploded was almost unbearable. Commander Rhett Ward stood motionless, hands gripping the cold steel edge of the console, eyes fixed on the blank spot in the sky where their self-proclaimed divine vessel had been. It was gone, vaporized, not reduced to rubble, erased like it had never existed. No one on the bridge spoke for a long moment. Even the AI systems inside Havoc Dawn paused, processing the impossibility of what they had just achieved. Ward didn't need confirmation. He saw the look in the crew's eyes, shock, disbelief, and something more powerful rising beneath it. Rage. Justified rage. Finally, something they could aim it at. The Sarathi didn't understand what they had just triggered. A quiet beep broke the silence. "Incoming signals," said Braith, the communications officer, his voice low but trembling. "All over the grid. Military frequencies, civilian bands, even pirate networks. Everyone saw that." Ward nodded slowly. "Let them watch. They need to know." "They think we're back," Braith added, swallowing hard. "That Earth's fighting again." Ward's lips twisted into a bitter smirk. "We never stopped. We just ran out of weapons." The Havoc Dawn wasn't just a weapon. It was a grudge made of steel and fire, a revenge story built across decades of war, loss, and betrayal. He tapped into the command interface and pulled up the tactical display. Sarathi ships still hovered across the globe, but now they weren't moving. No new attacks, no annihilations, just stillness, hesitation, fear. Good. He scanned the global map. North America, 3 Sarathi command vessels. Europe, 5. Asia, 14, with 2 planetary orbitals. The rest were scattered, patrolling, watching, waiting, or maybe wondering if they could bleed too. "I want tactical scans of every Sarathi ship within our reach. Prioritize flagships and planetary relays," Ward ordered. "Target their communication arrays, not their engines. Let them watch the next one burn." Braith nodded, fingers flying across his console. "On it." Beside him, Kelvin, the engineer who had helped design parts of the Dawn, whistled low. "You realize what we just did, right? That wasn't just a ship, Commander. That was their holy ark, their floating throne." "Then we made a proper sacrifice," Ward muttered. He knew better than to think they could just waltz through the Sarathi fleet like a hot knife through butter. That first strike had worked because they hadn't seen it coming. Because they were arrogant. That wouldn't last. Now the gods were angry. Sure enough, 2 Sarathi vessels began moving from orbit, descending toward the Atlantic. Sleek, crescent-shaped things made from white alloy that shimmered like water. Ward's hood showed them changing formation, tight, aggressive. Their shields pulsed with visible energy now. No more disguises. "They're coming," Braith confirmed. "ETA, 5 minutes." Ward cracked his neck and turned to the rest of the bridge. "Stations. Battle mode. We'll make them earn every second they spend in our skies." Havoc Dawn groaned to life, as though it too understood what was coming. The ship's interior shifted, bulkheads closing, lighting dimming to combat red. G-forces adjusted. Every sound now carried a sharpness, an edge that hadn't been there minutes ago. Kelvin stood over the weapons console. "Bringing primary railguns online. Gravity lance charging. Obliterator still needs a few hours before we can fire again." "Then we improvise," Ward said grimly. The Sarathi descended fast, streaking through cloud banks like falling stars. Within seconds, they were in range. The entire ship trembled as a surge of plasma energy splashed harmlessly against the Dawn's hardened shields. Ward smiled. They still didn't get it. He spoke calmly. Return fire. Give them a taste. The main guns roared, twin rail cannons firing hyperdense projectiles that tore through sound and light like the breath of hell. One of the Sarathi ships banked sharply, trying to dodge. It didn't matter. The slug caught the underside of its hull and exploded in a blossom of blue flame. The gods screamed. Ward listened to the chaos on the open channels. Alien shrieks, panic, confused commands. Then silence as one of the ships lost power and fell into the Atlantic like a stone. A column of water rose hundreds of meters into the air. The second ship kept firing, its blasts rattling the dawn harder now. Warning lights blinked across the command panel. One of the rear stabilizers was overheating. Another direct hit, and they'd be flying on a prayer. Ward turned to his tactical officer. Lure it in, make it chase, then give it hell with the lance. The dawn pivoted, burning through clouds like a meteor. The Sarathi ship gave pursuit, throwing energy bolts like a furious godchild. The ocean below boiled where they landed, but the human warship kept moving, drawing the alien vessel lower, tighter. Then came the moment. A flash in the distance, a cliff face with exposed iron deposits, the magnetic field perfect. Now, Ward barked. The gravity lance fired. It didn't explode. It bent the world. The beam twisted reality itself, dragging the Sarathi ship into a sudden collapse of gravity that crushed its structure like a soda can. The vessel didn't explode. It crumpled, folded into itself, and vanished in a shriek of metal. The second so-called god was dead. Ward exhaled slowly. The entire ship went silent again, listening. That silence broke seconds later. Sarathi distress signals lighting up every frequency. "They're retreating," Braith whispered. "Commander, they're actually pulling back." Ward leaned on the railing, jaw tight. "Then we hit them harder. Send the message. Earth isn't kneeling. Not today, not ever again." Over the next 12 hours, Havoc Dawn became a ghost of vengeance. They moved like shadows, hunting down isolated Sarathi ships and striking with terrifying precision. Every kill was broadcast, not to gloat, but to remind the human race that their spirit wasn't extinct. The resistance wasn't an idea anymore. It was steel. It was fire. It was back. The AI stitched together a comms feed that fed into pirate satellites, dead military relays, and underground servers. Footage of Sarathi ships dying over major cities went viral in minutes. People hiding in bunkers started cheering. Forgotten soldiers resurfaced. Even rogue AIs, long silent, pinged the dawn with encrypted battle hymns. But the Sarathi weren't done. On the 13th hour, they unleashed something new, something worse. Adjudicator. That was the closest translation the Dawn's systems could find. Not just a ship, a mobile tribunal, a floating fortress built to pass final judgment. A relic from the Sarathi's old conquests. Even they hadn't used one in centuries. It emerged from the clouds above the Pacific like a storm god, 3 miles long, shields layered in temporal folds. Its voice rang through every device still alive on Earth. "Judgment has come. Your defiance ends here." Ward stared at the massive form blotting out the sky. Even Havoc Dawn looked like a child's toy next to it. Braith's voice cracked. "Sir, we can't hit that with what we've got." Ward didn't blink. "I'm not planning to." He turned to the AI interface. "Override limiters. Prepare core overload protocols." Kelvin's eyes widened. "You're not serious." Ward didn't flinch. "I'm dead serious. Core overload. A full detonation of the dark matter drive. Enough to create a local singularity. It would destroy the Dawn and anything in a 5-mile radius, including the Judicator. A suicide move, but a final strike worthy of ending a war. Braith stood up. There's another way. There's got to be. There isn't, Ward cut him off. That thing won't stop, not until Earth is ash. We end it now. The crew stood silent. Every one of them had nothing left to lose. They nodded. Ward set the course. Straight through the Judicator's shields. As the engines roared to life, he activated one last broadcast. A single line. Even your gods bleed. Then he pressed the final code. But something unexpected happened. Just as the ship hit critical acceleration, as space itself began to distort, a flicker appeared on the Judicator's hull. Another ship. Small, human-made, a relic. One of Earth's early orbital defense fighters. Barely functional. A single pilot. It flew toward the Judicator at full speed. A kamikaze run. Before Ward could stop it, the relic slammed into the Judicator's outer deck, and something inside it detonated. A pulse of energy shot through the fortress. Not destruction. Something else. A feedback loop. The Judicator spasmed. Its shields flickered. And then, for the first time in Sarathi history, it began to fall. Ward stared, stunned. What the hell was that? He whispered. Braith blinked at his console. That was the Ardent Spear, old orbital fighter, prototype model. Who flew it? No ID, just a tag in the flight log, Braith replied. Codename, Ghostfather. Ward swallowed. He'd heard that name before. A pilot who'd lost everything in the first wave. Disappeared, presumed dead. Not anymore. Ward turned to the crew. Looks like we're not the only ghosts fighting. For a few seconds, the world stood still. Commander Ward watched the Judicator fall like a slow-motion avalanche. It wasn't a clean crash. The Sarathi fortress convulsed mid-air, a grotesque twist of metal and light. Its shields sputtered like dying stars, whole sections of the hull crumbling under stress it was never designed to endure. The sound, though distant, carried through Earth's thin cloud layer like a scream from the heavens. The Ardent Spear, that ancient Earth fighter, had punched a hole no human technology should have been capable of. And it wasn't just a physical breach. Something more had ruptured. Sarathi communications exploded into a storm of panic. They were broadcasting in tight, encrypted clusters, overlapping frequencies in a desperate scramble. Ward had no translator for their full dialect, but even without it, fear was universal. They were breaking. Get me visuals on the Judicator's core, Ward snapped, walking quickly to the forward display. Kelvin zoomed in the feed. What they saw didn't make sense. Deep inside the alien vessel, beneath layers of shattered armor and exposed machinery, there was something glowing. Not Sarathi tech. Not even recognizable as mechanical. It looked like dash. A containment cage? Braith murmured. What the hell is that thing? The object inside was floating, pulsing, alive in a way that metal shouldn't be. It throbbed with a dull blue light, encased in a sphere of energy. Every time the Judicator twisted or jolted, that cage remained still, like gravity meant nothing to it. Ward's stomach turned. Zoom closer. As the image clarified, they saw it. Inside that blue energy prison was a human being. Naked, gaunt, emaciated, hooked to tubes, his body hovering limply in some kind of stasis. He looked ancient and broken. Braith's voice cracked. That's a person. Kelvin's hands froze over the console. They're using him. As a power source? No, Ward said quietly. As a key. The Judicator's internal systems were hard-linked to the cage. Biometric signatures, synaptic relays. That man, whoever he was the Judicator. He wasn't powering the machine. He was controlling it, or worse, it was feeding on him. "God damn it," Ward whispered. "That's why they kept calling themselves gods. They didn't become gods. They stole humanity to pretend to be." Kelvin paled. "You think they've done this before?" "Probably not just once. Probably not just to us." It clicked. The arrogance, the fear when their ships started falling, the silence when their divine authority was questioned. The Sarathi weren't omnipotent. They were parasites. They found worlds, harvested their strongest manipulated minds, and turned them into living weapons. Then they wrapped it all in golden armor and told the survivors to kneel. Ward's fists clenched. "Track the core's stability. If that man dies, we lose the chance to learn what they really are." Braith nodded, working fast. Judicator's falling slow now, stabilizing trajectory. They're trying to keep it airborne. "Let them try." Meanwhile, Earth's surface was waking up. All over the globe, factions once divided by war, politics, and greed were pulling resources together. From the buried bunkers in Siberia to the solar farms of the Saharan wastes, old enemies were reactivating weapons caches and launching orbital scanners. The Havoc Dawn's assault had shown the truth. The gods weren't invincible. And now everyone wanted a piece of them. Pirate clans that had refused to choose sides were hacking Sarathi patrol routes. Rogue militaries started coordinating again, dropping old vendettas like rotting corpses. Even off-world colonies that had gone dark were sending encrypted signals. The message was clear. We fight now, or we die later. The Sarathi reacted with brutality. Within hours of the Judicator's collapse, they initiated a global purge. No more ultimatums, no more demands. Cities began vanishing. Tokyo, Sao Paulo, and Johannesburg, each wiped clean with orbital beams. Civilization itself trembled. Ward knew what was happening. The Sarathi had been humiliated. Now they were burning the world to erase the stain. "Sir," Braith said quietly, "New York's next." Ward closed his eyes. "Estimated time?" 15 minutes. He thought about all the people still trapped there, the refugees, the children, the injured. He made his decision fast. "We're going in." Kelvin flinched. "What?" "You heard me. New York, full speed. We'll intercept the fleet before they fire." "That's suicide. There are 6 ships above the coast, Commander." Ward's voice was stone. "Then we take out 6. He pushed Havoc Dawn beyond safe thrust limits, the ship groaning as if it were being torn from the inside. The clouds ripped apart as they shot westward, leaving sonic booms and vapor trails across the sky. Inside, lights flickered. Panels sparked. But no one said a word. They all knew the stakes. As they broke through the upper atmosphere above Manhattan, they saw it. 6 Sarathi destroyers in formation, glowing with weapon charge energy. Civilians below ran like ants, sirens blaring across broken streets. Ward growled, "Target Central Cruiser. Focus fire. Drop it hard." Havoc Dawn's primary railguns unleashed hell. The lead Sarathi ship never saw it coming. A double impact rocked its hull, splitting its outer ring. It spun out of control, crashing into its neighbor with a shriek of metal and light. 1 down. The other 4 turned instantly, unleashing concentrated plasma beams. One struck the Dawn's left flank, sending systems into a tailspin. Hull breach warnings lit the bridge. Kelvin shouted, "Core temperature rising. We can't take another direct hit." "Then make it count," Ward barked. "All forward weapons. Give them everything." The Dawn pivoted and launched a full barrage, mines, lances, and antimatter torpedoes in a synchronized arc. The sky turned into a fireworks display of annihilation. Another Sarathi destroyer went down, its engines erupting in a burst that consumed 2 nearby drones. But the cost was high. A second plasma blast tore through the Dawn's starboard engine. Sparks rained across the bridge. Consoles exploded. Braith slammed into the floor, his leg mangled. "I'm good. Keep firing." Ward gritted his teeth, blood running down his forehead. "Emergency power. Redirect to main cannons. Let's die on our feet." Then another miracle. A blip appeared on the radar. Then 3. Then 9. Small human fighters, custom-built, guerrilla style, strapped together with scavenged tech and suicidal courage, screamed into the airspace. "Reinforcements!" Kelvin gasped. Braith was laughing despite the pain. "Looks like someone lit the beacon. That's the Red Sun fleet, out of the old Kazakhstan wastes." And they weren't alone. More ships followed. Old military cruisers, repurposed transport freighters, even asteroid mining rigs outfitted with retrofitted weapons. Every surviving human faction that could fly, fight, or kamikaze was showing up. They didn't come for orders. They came for blood. The sky over New York became a battleground. Havoc Dawn kept firing until her barrels melted. Then they rammed one Sarathi vessel head-on, crushing its central core with brute force, before breaking away and climbing again. Ward's vision blurred. His ribs were broken. Blood covered the side of his face. But he kept moving. He had no choice. Humanity was watching. Earth was listening. Every act of defiance was rewriting the future. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the main comms channel. Not Braith, not Kelvin, not even Ward. It was the prisoner. The man inside the judicator. His voice was dry, ragged, like it hadn't spoken in years. But his words cut through the chaos. "You are not alone. I remember. My name is Elias Thorne. I was taken long ago. I was once human. They made me into this, but you reminded me." Ward froze. The Sarathi had taken him, manipulated his mind, turned him into a weapon. But he wasn't broken. He was waking up. "They fear you now. I can help, but I need a signal. Connect me to your ship. I will open them. From the inside." Ward looked to Braith, who was barely conscious but nodded. "Do it," Ward said. The link was established. And inside the judicator, something ancient and terrible broke free. The false gods screamed, and Earth began its reckoning. Inside the shattered husk of the judicator, Elias Thorne opened his eyes fully for the first time in 73 years. He didn't remember the details. Not all of them. His mind had been sliced apart and rewired too many times to hold on to a clean history. But what he did remember burned like fire under his skin. Earth, his wife, his son's face the day they took him, and the feeling of metal rods burrowing into his spine as Sarathi priests chanted in a language he was forced to learn while screaming. He had been their weapon, their prophet, their god. And now, because of a single human warship, he remembered who he really was. Pain seared through his nerves as the containment systems tried to hold him in place. But something had changed. The systems were weakening. The Judicator's AI was failing, losing control of its captive throne. Elias didn't waste time. The signal from Havoc Dawn was like a hand reaching into the dark, and he grabbed it with everything he had left. It wasn't clean. It was raw, violent code, a data pulse jacked straight into Sarathi control relays through hacked human systems. He wrote it, ripping through firewalls, bypassing synaptic filters. Within seconds, he was inside the Sarathi network. Inside them. And he was angry. Across the planet, Sarathi ships twitched mid-flight. Power grids surged. Comms went dead. Even the orbital relays blinked out, one by one. It wasn't just sabotage. It was possession. Elias had spent decades entangled with the very nerves of their civilization. Now, he used those connections like wires in a bomb. On board the Havoc Dawn, Commander Ward felt it immediately. The ship shuddered, not from damage but from a sudden feedback surge across all tactical feeds. Enemy ships began showing internal schematics, weak points, core locations, pilots, every vulnerability laid bare. "He's inside them," Braith gasped, staring at the screen. "He's in their systems." Kelvin blinked, awestruck. "That's not just hacking. He's gutting them." Ward didn't smile. Not yet. He leaned into the console and barked, "Prioritize strike targets based on Elias's feed. Focus on relay nodes and fleet command ships. If we cut their chain of command, they'll turn feral." Braith nodded. "Already mapping." Outside, the skies over Earth were changing. The remaining Sarathi ships had stopped moving in coordinated patterns. Many hovered still, stuttering in the air like puppets with tangled strings. Others turned on each other, unable to distinguish threat signals from internal ghost commands Elias had inserted. He was scrambling them from the inside out, but it wasn't enough. Ward saw it in the data. The Sarathi still had one last card. A weapon not yet deployed. He tapped the screen. "What is this signature? Deep orbit, above the equator." Kelvin frowned. It can't be." "What?" Ward snapped. "That's their exile fleet." Ward stiffened. "The one they said they never needed again?" "The same. Last recorded movement was centuries ago. They use it when a planet's considered irredeemable." "Total annihilation." Kelvin nodded slowly. "It's a fleet of planet breakers, not for conquest, for erasure." Ward stared at the screen. At the 10 crimson blips slowly descending from deep space. "I want everything redirected. Everyone!" Braith coughed blood. "Sir, the planet's still burning. We have ground units fighting in Africa, Southeast Asia, hell, even the oceans. If we pull them now..." "There'll be no planet left to fight on if that fleet lands," Ward interrupted. "Call everyone. Pirates, rebels, colonies. This is the last wall." Kelvin whispered, "We won't survive it." "We're not supposed to," Ward replied. "We're supposed to make sure they never forget what happens when humans stop kneeling." He broadcast a final message. It played on every frequency. "Earth stands. Earth burns. Earth fights. Whatever you are, whatever you thought we are the species that kills its gods." And then, the skies above split. The exile fleet had arrived. Enormous rectangular behemoths, black as obsidian, silent as death, emerged from orbit, their surfaces rippling with gravitational distortions. They didn't glow. They didn't announce themselves. They just descended, indifferent to life below. The first wave fired. A portion of the Indian Ocean simply vanished, replaced by a vortex of collapsing water and fractured tectonic plates. Tsunamis erupted on every continent. Satellites fried. Light bent unnaturally. The earth groaned. Ward gripped the side rail. "That's just a warning." Then Elias's voice came through the comms, stronger this time. "I can stall them, but I need a signal amplifier. Something deep space, something old." Ward didn't hesitate. "There's only one left, the Pluto array, offline since the solar flare." Kelvin's face went pale. "That thing's in pieces. debris field since the Exodus. Ward stared into space. Can you reroute it? Braith wiped blood from his mouth. We can try. If it works, Elias gets full reach. If not, Ward muttered. He burns out trying. The minutes that followed were chaos. Ground forces shifted focus, diverting every orbital platform's energy toward patching the Pluto signal. The Dawn moved into position to act as a carrier, focusing its core to bridge the frequency gap. Elias reached out again, this time in pain. They're resisting me. The exile it's different. Colder. No ego. Just death. You don't need to stop it, Ward said, eyes cold. Just slow it down. And Elias did. He screamed into the Sarathi hive net like a banshee, flooding their systems with every scrap of human memory they had ever harvested. Children's laughter, battlefield terror, love letters, prison screams, and defiant last words. He used their own arrogance against them. They had stored those echoes as trophies. Now he turned them into viruses. One by one, the exile ships began glitching. Their weapons paused mid-fire. Their shields flickered. Not disabled, but distracted. Confused. It was enough. Human forces surged forward in the chaos. Fighters rammed command bridges. Freighters laced with explosives drove themselves into weak points. Even grounded militias fired salvaged ICBMs into low-orbit behemoths. It wasn't clean. It wasn't professional. But it was human. Ward piloted the Havoc Dawn directly into the belly of the lead exile ship. Inside, the architecture was nothing like the others. No control panels, no bridges, just chambers, endless halls filled with preserved corpses, humans, aliens, beings from worlds never known, all drained, all displayed, trophies. Gods don't make museums, Ward spat. He armed the core overload again. This time there would be no pulling back. Elias, he said softly, you ready to go home? The voice that answered wasn't sad or bitter. It was calm. I never left. Ward smiled. Then let's make it count. He fired the overload. The Havoc Dawn detonated inside the exile ship like a dying star, cracking it open from within. The resulting energy pulse knocked 3 more out of formation. Earth's sky burned with both ash and light. When it cleared, 5 of the exile ships were gone. 2 more spiraled into deep space, systems corrupted. The last 3 fled, retreated. And for the first time since they descended, the Sarathi were gone. Vanished. No surrender. No message. Just silence. Earth was in ruins. Millions were dead. But humanity had done the impossible. They had survived their gods. And in the rubble of what remained, people began to rise again. Ward's sacrifice was recorded. So was Elias's scream, now preserved as the voice that saved a species. Statues weren't built, not yet. But stories were told. And every child born after that year knew the same truth. When the sky falls and the stars claim to rule, there will always be one warship that remembers how to kill gods. The world didn't celebrate, not right away. When the last of the Sarathi disappeared into the black void of space, they didn't leave behind surrender documents or white flags. They didn't even leave corpses. Just silence. A silence so wide and thick it felt like the whole planet had been placed inside a vacuum jar and forgotten. Ash-covered continents. Cities lay in melted heaps of steel and concrete. The oceans had receded unnaturally in places, revealing sunken wreckage from wars no one even remembered. Entire regions were irradiated or left under perpetual electrical storms, and the sky, once blue, once full of birds and clouds, was now a canvas painted with black streaks and smoldering clouds. Humanity had won. But no one felt like winners. Commander Ward's name was now written in dozens of languages across the cracked remnants of Earth's still-standing walls. The man who broke heaven. Some called him a legend, others called him a martyr, but no one argued he'd been necessary. The Havoc Dawn was gone, reduced to a myth and dust in orbit. But pieces of her, salvaged wreckage and fried core parts, were retrieved by survivors. Soldiers treated her like a shrine, placing them in makeshift temples and rebel compounds like they were sacred bones. Yet even as Earth buried its dead and limped forward, something new crept in. It started with the Judicator's remains. After Elias Thorne's intervention and the Exile Fleet's retreat, his containment cage had shattered, freeing what was left of his broken body. A scavenger team found him unconscious, his skin burned and tissue fused to what remained of the Sarathi hardware. They didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't human anymore, not fully. But he wasn't alien either. And worst of all, he was still alive. He was taken to a secure facility, buried in the Scandinavian ice shelf, monitored around the clock. Doctors tried to treat him, but his biology had changed. His blood carried nanostructures never before seen. His bones were layered in fiber carbon and something far older than human tech. He shouldn't have survived. But he did, and while he slept, he whispered. Names, codes, coordinates. Places the Sarathi never touched on Earth. Places they avoided. Places where things had been buried. That's when the Resistance Command sent in recon teams. Skeptical, tired, worn down to the bone, but curious. One of those places was deep in the Namib Desert, a zone the Sarathi never patrolled, not even when global control was theirs. It wasn't strategic, no water, no people, just sand and bones. The team landed in the middle of a salt-crusted basin, where they found something strange. A square of obsidian metal, 20 feet across, partially buried in sand. It was humming, not visibly, not loud, but the moment their boots touched the metal, their sensors went haywire. Heart rates spiked, blood pressure surged. One soldier began crying uncontrollably, another had a seizure. They called in a secondary team with psychic blockers and EMP casings. The square opened. Beneath it was a staircase carved into bedrock, descending for nearly 3 kilometers straight down. What they found at the bottom wasn't a base. It was a prison, not Sarathi. Older, walls lined with fossilized remains of alien species. None of them Sarathi, all twisted in agony. Symbols scorched into the stone, not written but burned with precision heat. In the center, a sphere of pulsing crystal. It didn't glow. It breathed, alive, watching, waiting. The soldiers didn't touch it. They weren't fools. They sealed the shaft, blocked the entry, sent word back to the High Command. Ward's replacement, General Lorne, read the report with trembling hands. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. A science officer near him said only 3 words. "Not Sarathi tech." Lorne stared at the final line of Elias Thorne's last whispered coordinates before he fell silent in his ice cell. They weren't the first gods. That changed everything. The war hadn't been a battle for domination. It had been a border skirmish on the edge of something bigger, something older. Ward had always believed the Sarathi were arrogant parasites who pretended to be divine. That was still true, but they hadn't invented the idea. They inherited it. And maybe they were running from it. Resistance intelligence started digging. Old Sarathi databanks retrieved from downed ships were decrypted, but half the files were missing, self-deleted during the retreat. What was left painted a disturbing picture. The Sarathi had once ruled more than 500 systems. Then something came, something they never named, only labeled in their records as the Unspoken. That's when their God program began. That's when they started fusing biology with weaponry, building judicators and harvesting rare specimens from every species they encountered. Not to conquer, but to survive. Their divinity was a shield, a lie told so loudly it might scare away the dark. It hadn't worked. Ward had died believing he had ended a tyranny. But in truth, he had kicked open a door the Sarathi had spent millennia trying to keep shut. Now humanity stood in front of that door, bloodied, limping, furious, and the only question left was, do we close it again, or do we walk through? On the third week after the end of the war, a probe sent to the far edges of the solar system picked up a faint signal. Not Sarathi. Older. Broadcast on a frequency not used by any known civilization. The message repeated only one phrase, in perfect English. Earth has passed the threshold. The trial begins. That night, the stars blinked. Literally. For 3 full seconds, every known star visible from Earth dimmed simultaneously. Astronomers were baffled. Physicists were terrified. And deep in his frozen chamber, Elias Thorne opened his eyes again. This time, they glowed. The Resistance Council wanted to destroy him. Some said he was compromised, a leftover tool from the Sarathi, a sleeper weapon. But not all agreed. Dr. Mireya Flynn, one of Earth's few surviving quantum neurologists, insisted he was their only link to whatever was coming. She argued he could feel the direction of the next threat. Elias didn't argue. He just asked for one thing. Let me leave. Flynn frowned. Why? His voice was hoarse. Because I know where they're coming from. She leaned closer. The Sarathi? Elias shook his head slowly. No. The ones the Sarathi feared. Word spread fast. All over Earth, whispers started to take shape. Some believed it was another invasion. Others said it was judgment, an ancient cosmic test. But the men and women who had fought in the skies, in the dirt, and in the black of space, they didn't care what it was called. They were building again, not cities, not peace, but warships. Because Earth wasn't going to hide this time. They had shattered the illusion of gods once. They could do it again. But now they knew one thing for certain. Some monsters don't want worship. They want silence. And when that silence is broken, they come. It started in whispers. A technician on the Mars relay station swore she heard voices in the static, ones that spoke in perfect sync with her thoughts. On Ceres, a mining foreman reported dreams of cities he'd never seen, burning under black suns. A child in northern Canada sketched the same symbol over and over in the snow, a triangle with an eye hollowed out by darkness. No pupils, no iris, just emptiness. And then came the probe. It had been sent to the edge of the solar system after the war, a battered relic from the old days, repurposed with new code and layered with shielding. The idea was simple. Find signs of the retreating Sarathi, track their flight, maybe catch a glimpse of their homeworld, if one even existed. What it found instead was absence, not silence. Absence. There was no radiation beyond Neptune, no heat, no gravitational lensing, no starlight, just a void, a perfect black hole in space where the laws of physics refused to cooperate. The probe's last transmission was 2 words. Something's watching. Then it was gone. Back on Earth, General Lorne slammed his fist on the conference table hard enough to split his knuckles. "We need more ships," he said through clenched teeth. "Bigger than the Dawn, faster, harder to trace, no more ceremony, just kill platforms." The Resistance heads, now calling themselves the Earth Defense Covenant, nodded. Their leader, a woman named Admiral Vaden, leaned forward. "You'll get them. But we also need eyes. Whatever's out there doesn't want to be seen. That makes it more dangerous than the Sarathi ever were." "And Elias?" asked a grizzled veteran from the South American Corps. Everyone turned. They all knew the question had to come eventually. Elias Thorne had been moved from the Scandinavian ice cell to a high-orbit facility known as Black Echo, built into the side of a long-dead comet, outfitted with the most secure protocols left in human engineering. He hadn't spoken in days, not until today. Dr. Mireya Flynn stood in the observation room, looking down through reinforced glass at what used to be a man. Elias sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes half shut, breathing steady. There were no restraints, none were needed. He never tried to leave, never even approached the doors. But everyone knew he could. "Are they coming?" she asked softly, watching him through the intercom. Elias didn't open his eyes. They never left. She frowned. "Then what are they?" He opened his mouth slowly. The words came like rocks dragging across stone. "They are the architects." The room fell silent. She blinked. "The Sarathi?" He shook his head. "The ones who built the Sarathi and broke them. The ones who wrote the laws your atoms obey. The ones who punish defiance not with death, but with purpose." Flynn's skin went cold. "That doesn't make sense." Elias finally looked at her. His irises were black now. Not from modification, not from corruption, from knowing. "That's the point." The Covenant convened emergency session within the hour. They ran the name Architects through every database, every intercepted Sarathi file, even ancient human mythology. There were no matches. Nothing even close. The name wasn't a label. It was a warning. Ward had believed the Sarathi were pretenders. Parasites who called themselves gods. That was true. But the reason they called themselves gods was because they remembered what real ones looked like, and they had been hiding from them ever since. The signal from beyond Neptune returned again 3 days later. This time it wasn't words. It was a vision, projected across every surviving communication screen, hijacked without warning. Even machines not powered by traditional circuitry flickered with it. An image, Earth as seen from orbit. Then, slowly, every living human, everyone, was peeled away from the image one by one. No screams, no blood, just erased. The Earth turned gray, then black, then gone. The vision ended. No threats, no demands. Just a demonstration, a possibility. The message was clear. This is what we do. Earth responded in the only way it knew how. By building. The world became a forge. Every continent turned into a production line. Ships began taking shape under pressure domes and volcanic caves. Engines bigger than city blocks were tested in secret tunnels. Crews were trained not for war, but for extinction-level resistance. No more pride, no more borders. Humanity finally understood that survival required unity fueled by fear. But Elias Thorne remained quiet. Until the 11th day. When the stars blinked again. This time, just one, Alpha Centauri A, It dimmed for exactly 4.6 seconds. Long enough to be noticed, short enough to make everyone wonder if they imagined it. Elias stood at his reinforced cell wall and whispered, without prompting, "That was their knuckle." Flynn stared. "What?" He turned toward her slowly. "The next will be their fist." It took all of 2 hours for Earth's long-range scanners to detect the ripple, a gravitational anomaly the size of Jupiter moving slowly toward the solar system. Speed, unknown. Shape, unreadable. Heat signature, none. It wasn't a ship. It was space that moved, space that bent. A thing so massive and old it no longer registered as mass, but as meaning. Flynn went to Elias again. "You knew this was coming." "Yes." "Why didn't you say anything?" He looked through her, not at her. "Because saying it doesn't stop it. Only preparing does." She stepped closer. "Then help us prepare." He finally smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had died and come back wrong. "Then you need to stop thinking like humans." Over the next 2 weeks, Elias taught Earth things it wasn't ready to learn. About quantum will, the idea that thought, when weaponized properly, could bend localized reality. About conscious machines that wrote their own purpose. About war forms, entities that didn't fight with weapons, but with inevitability. He drew designs for weapons no scientist understood. He described beings with no mass and infinite gravity. He whispered of languages spoken by vibrating dimensions. And Earth listened. Even the doubters listened, because the anomaly kept coming. Closer. Always closer. And then, on the 27th day after the Sarathi retreat, Elias finally gave the last piece. He drew a symbol on the floor of his cell, a perfect circle split by a diagonal line. He tapped it once. This was on their skin. Flynn frowned. "Who?" He stared into space. "The first human they took. The one we never found. The one who joined them." Flynn froze. "You're saying—" Elias nodded once. "They have a human now, just like the Sarathi had me." Her voice broke. "Who?" He whispered a name, and her blood ran cold. "Ward." It didn't make sense. Commander Rhett Ward was dead. Every record confirmed it. His ship, the Havoc Dawn, had detonated inside the exile ship in a final, calculated act of suicide. No escape pod had launched. No emergency beacon had fired. Not a single atom of his DNA had been recovered in the debris field. And yet Elias Thorne had spoken his name. Software calm. Certain. "They have Ward." The moment those words left his lips, the temperature in the black Echo observation deck dropped by 10 degrees. Dr. Mireya Flynn stood frozen, heart thudding in her chest. Not from fear, from betrayal. Ward wasn't just a hero. He had become Earth's symbol of survival. The myth. The ghost. The firebrand who lit humanity's rage. If Elias was right, then the gods hadn't just returned. They'd recruited Earth's finest. "You need to explain," she said finally, her voice raw. "Start from the beginning." Elias didn't look at her. He looked past her, into something only he could see. "When I was fused to the Judicator, my mind was linked to the Sarathi neural lattice. But beyond their lattice, deeper, there was something beneath them, a sublayer, a web so old it wasn't coded. It was felt." Flynn frowned. "What does that mean?" "They weren't alone. They never were. There was always something above them, And one day, during a deep scan, I felt a presence enter the web. New, furious, powerful. His eyes locked with hers. It was human. Flynn's throat tightened. You're saying Ward's alive? Alive, but changed. They don't use flesh the way we do. They rewrite, they unmake, they give you the illusion of choice, but it's all scaffolding. Underneath, he's still himself, but cracked, like a mirror reflecting something it was never meant to hold. Flynn stepped back, disbelief scraping at her reason. Ward would never serve them. Elias's voice dropped. That's what makes him dangerous. The Earth Defense Covenant didn't take long to act. Within 12 hours, Admiral Vaden issued Directive Shadowglass, an absolute lockdown on all files relating to Ward, the Havoc Dawn, or any remnants of the Exile wreckage. Anyone who so much as whispered the word architects without clearance faced permanent exile to off-world mining colonies. They weren't trying to silence the truth. They were trying to buy time. Because if Elias was right, then somewhere in deep space, the man who saved Earth might now be the weapon poised to destroy it. And then came the second signal. Not from the anomaly, but from within the solar system. An old comm frequency, coded in pre-war encryption, used only by Ward's personal team during the final resistance campaign. Only one message pulsed through. You left the door open. Location. Drifting asteroid field between Saturn and Uranus. Admiral Vaden immediately dispatched the Crucible, a stealth-class heavy frigate carrying a full platoon of elite operators and a team of psych-sensitive analysts. Flynn was assigned to oversee the mission. Elias Thorne would accompany them. He was chained in 13 layers of containment metal, each designed to fracture at the first sign of psychic contamination. None of the soldiers dared to look him in the eye. When they reached the coordinates, the asteroid field wasn't a field at all. It was debris, metal, burned hulls of Sarathi vessels, dozens. But there were no signs of battle, no scorch marks, no plasma residue, just decay, like time itself had folded around them and drained the energy out. Then they saw the ship. It wasn't Sarathi, it wasn't human, it was both. A twisted hybrid of Havoc Dawn architecture and alien alloy, sleek, unnatural geometry fused with brutalist steel. It hovered silently among the asteroids, not powered, breathing. Lights pulsed like heartbeats. Shapes moved behind the reinforced glass. It had a name burned into its hull. Hymn of Ashes. Flynn whispered, "That's Ward's handwriting." Elias didn't speak. He just stared. And then the ship opened. No external mechanism, no signal. It simply split, like skin parting over a scar. They entered slowly. Inside, it was wrong. Gravity pulsed in waves. Time seemed fractured. Their suits flickered with conflicting data. What should have been a 20-meter corridor extended for miles. Blood drifted through the air, suspended in perfect globes. And then they found the room. A cathedral. Metal pews, a long black altar. At the far end, hovering, was a figure in an EVA suit stripped of identification, helmet cracked, face obscured by misted glass. But everyone knew. Flynn stepped forward. "Commander Ward?" The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. Elias stepped beside her. He looked into the misted glass and smiled. "You remember me?" The figure twitched, and then it spoke. Not with sound, with echo. Every crew member heard the same words, in their native tongue, in their private thoughts. "We were never meant to survive." Flynn's knees buckled. She grabbed the wall, gasping. The ship trembled. Elias stepped closer, speaking aloud now. "Why did you let them take you?" The echo came again. "I didn't. I followed them." Flynn's voice cracked. "Why?" This time there was silence. Then, a low hum, and a memory entered their minds, projected like a nightmare film. Ward, inside the core of the exile ship. Not dying, transcending, not through choice, through force. The moment before the Dawn's core detonated, the exile ship opened a gate, not physical, temporal, and Ward was pulled through, not to be saved. To be rewritten, and he had let it happen. Because in that moment he had seen the truth. The architects weren't conquerors, they were reminders of a universal rule older than time. All light must kneel, and Ward had decided that humanity had lit its fire too brightly. "I'm not your enemy," the voice said, echoing from the misted figure. "I'm your limit." Flynn whispered, "What do you want?" The answer came like a hammer. "Prepare them. I will return when the sky is right, and if they still stand tall, I will remind them what silence costs." The figure vanished, not walked, not dissolved, just ceased. The ship began to collapse. The crucible barely escaped the implosion. But Elias remained quiet the entire way back. Until Flynn finally asked, "Was that really him?" Elias stared at the stars. "It was what was left." She swallowed. "And the part they added?" He nodded. "That part's coming home." The sky cracked open on a Monday, not metaphorically, not as a warning. It tore, like fabric stretched beyond its limit, revealing something so vast it couldn't be measured, only felt. Astronomers reported a curvature ripple across the entire upper hemisphere, visible from both poles, appearing like a second atmosphere boiling beneath the first. Birds fell from the air. GPS died. Tides surged out of sync. People screamed without knowing why. And then came the sound. It wasn't thunder or machinery. It was the sound of recognition. A low, layered hum that vibrated in the bones, in the blood, in the parts of the brain humans didn't use anymore. The architects had arrived. Not in ships, not in bodies, in presence. Across the globe the lights went out. Electronics failed. Timekeeping stopped making sense. The moon dimmed, not because it wasn't reflecting sunlight, but because sunlight itself flickered. At Black Echo, the containment glass around Elias Thorne shattered. Not from explosion, but from release. He stood up calmly, eyes aglow, voice sharp. "They're here!" Dr. Mireya Flynn was already in motion. "Can we stop them?" Elias turned slowly, more human than he'd looked in weeks. "No." She froze. "Then what the hell are we supposed to do?" He stepped forward, breathing evenly. "Buy time. Delay extinction. Rage against inevitability. Isn't that what humans are best at?" Outside the orbiting station, Earth's planetary defense grid came alive. Rail cannons, orbital mines, even repurposed Sarathi energy siphons. Everything had been recalibrated under Elias's instruction. It wouldn't kill what was coming, but it might wound it. And then came the hymn of ashes. The hybrid ship, part Sarathi, part human, descended from behind Mars like a black comet. It wasn't running, it was leading. Inside it, Commander Ward. What was left of him? Gone was the flesh, the bone, the scars of his sacrifice. In their place, something forged. He wore no armor. His skin shimmered like heat against metal. His voice, when he spoke, echoed even without sound. He broadcast a single message on every surviving Earth channel. You were given your moment. Now I return to finish the silence. Flynn watched from the surface command bunker in northern Greenland, her knuckles white on the edge of the console. He's broadcasting from lunar orbit. Intercept? A tech asked. No, she whispered. Let him speak. Ward's voice cut across the atmosphere like scripture. I carried your name into fire. I bled for your flag. I shattered gods for you. And when I saw what was above them, I knew the truth. You weren't meant to endure. You were meant to echo, then end. I am that end. All over the world, humans prepared to die. But they did not kneel. In Cairo, child soldiers armed with scavenged Sarathi tech loaded EMP rifles and recited ancient war chants. In South Korea, a militia formed entirely of orphans stood on rooftops, missiles strapped to their backs. In Canada, tribes that had abandoned technology centuries ago prayed beside nuclear cores. Everyone stood, even knowing they could not win, because Earth had learned the oldest lesson. If you are going to fall, fall screaming. Then Elias Thorne stepped onto the transmission feed beside Flynn. He looked directly into the broadcast lens. Rhett, he said softly. Ward's image paused. Elias, you still remember who you were? I remember enough. Elias stepped closer. Then remember this. You never died. You were stolen. You were twisted into a reflection of a creature you would have fought. That's not power. That's failure. Ward didn't respond for a long moment. Then, do you still believe this species deserves to survive? Elias nodded. I believe survival isn't earned by perfection. It's earned by resistance. Ward closed his eyes. The sky split again, and the architect came. It wasn't a shape, it was a subtraction. A piece of the sky simply vanished, and in its place, absence, a moving void. Gravity bent, oceans rose, the core of the earth itself pulsed in revolt. Weapons fired, projectiles soared. The crucible launched its final payload, a solar destabilizer wrapped in a black hole fragment. It disappeared into the void without impact. Ward descended. The hymn of ashes burned the air. Cities buckled under its presence. Weather collapsed. Storms screamed. And then Elias Thorne left the planet. Not in a ship, in light. He rose from the bunker, his body igniting, becoming strands of energy. Flynn watched, screaming orders for launch crews, but it was too late. He was gone, streaming towards the void like a comet of human defiance. Inside the hymn, Ward opened his arms, welcoming him. Their clash cracked the upper atmosphere. No one saw what happened between them. No sensor could record it. But the world felt it. For a moment, time stopped. And then the void screamed. The architect recoiled. The hymn exploded in a blossom of molten light. Ward's scream, pure human rage, echoed across the frequencies one last time. Remember us. And then the sky was blue again. Not clean, not calm, but real. The void was gone. The architect, for now, had withdrawn. Earth lay in ruins. Half the planet burned. The other half starved. But humanity had done what no species ever had. It made a god bleed. And when the dust settled, Dr. Mireya Flynn stood alone in the ashes of the northern bunker, the world quiet around her. She raised a transmitter to her mouth. Log this, she said. Date unknown. Sky cracked. Faith intact. They came to end us. They left with a scar. She paused, then whispered into the mic. For Ward. For Elias. For every forgotten name. She turned to the horizon, where a new warship was being constructed. Bigger. Stronger. Carved with one phrase in every known language, "We never kneel."